Is going on, everybody, and welcome to the Thursday edition of the Stochastic NHL Strategy Show. I am your host, Josh Harris. It took me a few hours to notice this morning that not all 14 games were on today's slate. They left off the last 4. And honestly, this slate is crazy enough where we don't need chalk Colorado. We don't need all those bad teams, Boston included. I'm just kind of glad that they did this. I know they've been doing it in NBA a lot this year. I think they're calling it for player something. Who knows? But I honestly don't mind it. At 10 games, the slate is wild already. So 14 games would have been insane. So I kind of like what they did on this slate. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a fan. I don't like the monster slates. I don't like 13, 14, 15 games. You and I always say 6 to 9 games is kind of the sweet spot. I don't mind 10. Just in general, yes, it's nice to not have to deal with the Colorado decision. It's nice to not have to deal with super cheap Seattle and Calgary. But just in general, much prefer 10 games over 14 games. And it's quite the 10-game slate. We're going over some of the chalk spots via top stacks. We'll definitely talk about those as we go on through the show. There's some interesting chalk here tonight. So it's one of those nights where I don't think it's too hard to get away from the chalk, but we'll definitely go through each game and break them down one by one.
Now, I realize I'm an idiot. That's a very blanket statement, but on Tuesday, we had a lot of big winners in our Discord, and of course, I forgot to write it down.
I mean, I have them, so I can go through them real quick.
Cliffy has them. Cliffy's the man.
Yeah, we had Am Jennison take down first place in the forward check for 1K. Cashed a bunch of lineups, got one. Hold on, sorry. Supposed to bring that up on a different screen. Let me just. There we go. Am Jennison took down first place in the forward check. Cashed a bunch of lineups, got one to the top. Real nice night by him. B-Mac kept his heater going, 25K up top. Had Colorado, had some cheap Philly, had a big game from Joey Decord, who took the overtime loss, but still had a really nice game in goal. So B-Mac, I think Laffy said it on Twitter, B-Mac's been on quite the little heater of late. He kept that going. So great night from him. And then it's me, B23, first place in the cross check for 20K. I'm assuming had another Colorado lineup. Colorado obviously did the job that night. We had a bunch of winners, some big winners, real, probably one of the better nights of the season for the Discord on Tuesday night. So congrats to all the winners. Hopefully we can get a few more out there tonight with Colorado off the slate. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah, congrats to Am Jennison, B-Mac on a massive heater. Not taking anything away from you guys. That was a great night. But winning the $20 150 max with a single bullet by double-digit points is disgusting. That is nasty. So congrats to you. B-Mac, if you're gonna have a nice little tax bill at the end of the year, but hopefully you're in Canada, so that won't be as bad. If you're in the United States, pouring out for the homie B-Mac. But we should get into this slate, 10 games. Before we do, just wanted to say thank you all for being here, supporting us throughout the season through the affiliate signups, just being here in general, talking some hockey with us. If you do want to go premium, we'll never make you go premium. But if you do, you can click the link in the chat. Use promo code Stochastic15. That'll get you 15% off your first week or month of any subscription. Excuse me. Let's get into this slate. I see Frostback is late. He's not here for his boys. Probably for the best. Anaheim Ducks with a 2.1 total. Heading into Toronto, the Leafs have a 3.9. John Gibson started last night, got lit up like a Christmas tree on the penalty kill. it's going to be Lucas Dostal tonight, who is – I hate slandering John Gibson. I'm not slandering John Gibson here, but Lucas Dostal is the better goalie. Like, it's just a fact. Yeah. So, better goaltender in for the Ducks. Not much in front of him, right? Like, they're still starting Trouba and Cam Fowler. And they're sitting their young guys. Like, that pairing, obviously, we don't have data on it yet. But when we do, it's not going to be great. Toronto's still running a 5-forward power play unit, which I don't like. But it is Matthews, Marner, Nyes on the top line. Nylander, Tavares, Pacioretty. Ducks, they didn't, obviously they got crushed yesterday. They could be switching lines. It's a 2.1 total. I'm not running out to play the Ducks here tonight, specifically because the one line I'd have interest in is 16,600, and I'm not road stacking a Ryan Strome line on a 10-game slate and 2.1 total. So I'm out on the Ducks. The top power play unit for the Leafs is Matthews, Marner, Nyes, Tavares, and Nylander. The big point here is Nylander plays the full 2 minutes. So while I prefer Toronto 1 as a full stack, it's one of those things where I really want to get Nylander into my lineup, and that gets really expensive. If you leave off Nyes and add in Nylander or something like that, you're pushing, 24,000. Now, if Colorado was on this slate, they would have been over 24,000. So, there's probably going to be ways to get them in there. As a stack, I do prefer Matthews, Marner, Nyes. I like Tavares at 5-on-5 doesn't do too much for me, but he is on the power play. Pacioretty is going to play, 14, 15 minutes, and they have more ownership than the Toronto top line. That Tavares line, 18.1% projected. Matthews, 15.1% projected. I'm fine with Toronto 1, but I really want to find a way to get Nylander in. I guess you could just straight up power play stack and get super cheap guys around them, but I'm going to try to figure out a way to get Nylander in there. Maybe you just do like Matthews, Nylander, Nyes, something like that. I don't know. Like, you have to work it out for yourselves, but as a stack, Toronto 1, but I prefer the power play guys.
Yeah, I'm not going to be long on Anaheim either. Like you said, that Troy Terry line, 16,600, it's just way too expensive. Like, there are honestly other lines on the road that are $3,000-$4,000 cheaper that I'd rather play anyway. So with the savings, it's not even a factor. The Toronto side is where my interest is. I agree with you on the point about Nylander, and the reason why is because this is a really good power play matchup, right? Like, the Ducks do have a pretty bad penalty kill. They don't take a ton of penalties. They didn't take a lot to start the year. Over the last 4 or 5 weeks, they've been middle of the league. So, taking a little bit more, but not a lot. Certainly not like last season. But the penalty kill itself is it's very bad. And over the last few years, Nylander, it gets in on 64% of the team's power play goals, of the top units power play goals. It's more than Matthews and it's more than Tavares, right? This guy is him and Marner kind of make that power play go. You know what I mean? Obviously Matthews is the finisher. He is a goal scorer. So is Nylander to an extent, on pace for another 40-goal season, if I'm not mistaken. So I agree with you. I'd probably try to find a way to get Nylander in, whether it's I think you could probably just do a Nylander, Marner, Matthews stack and go look for super cheap players elsewhere. There are cheap players again in Philly, again, in Columbus that we'll talk about. Certainly, Chicago, San Jose, St. Louis. There are cheap lines, cheap players you can use elsewhere. I don't necessarily love, paying up about $25K for a 3-man stack. That is obviously ridiculously expensive. I think at the very least, I'd probably try to build around Matthews and Nylander, to be honest, even though they're across lines. It is a really good matchup for them, both at 5-on-5 and the power play. Like I said, Nylander gets really involved in the power play. So yeah, if I'm just 3-man stacking a line, it is Matthews, Marner, Nyes. Nyes is getting 19 plus minutes. Nylander Marner and Matthews typically play 20 to 21 minutes. So you're getting a lot of minutes with them. They've been really, really good this season. 3.9 goals per 60 minutes. Obviously, they're perfectly correlated. I'm fine with just playing Toronto 1, but I agree with you. I'd probably try to find a way to get Nylander in that stack because he is a valuable part of the power play, and this is a pretty good power play spot.
Yeah, I don't Leafs fans relax here. Relax. But I'm kind of treating them like I kind of treat Edmonton with McDavid and Draisaitl when their power play is going. Just play them together.
Yeah.
And then figure it out later. So that's kind of how I'm treating Toronto here tonight. Yeah. Los Angeles Kings with a 2.5 total. Heading into New Jersey, the Devils have a 3 total. Devils going Hughes, Bratt, Palat, Hischier, Meyer, Mercer. Now at home, the Devils would send out Nico Hischier against top competition, and that would be Kempe, Kopitar, Moore. And that line has not been great 5-on-5. The issue that I have with the Hischier line is Dawson Mercer is a giant boat anchor. If it was Stefan Nason there instead of Dawson Mercer, I would have interest in the Nico Hischier line here tonight. I just don't with Dawson Mercer. Then Hughes, Bratt, Palat going out against Danault, Laferriere, Fiala. That line has been ridiculously good, so I don't have a ton of interest in that line. Then he's flipped to the Kings side, and the going into New Jersey is not ideal either. If anything, it would be that Danault, Laferriere, Fiala line at 13-1. The price is still decent enough where you can fit them in without, doing some super expensive power play stack. You can fit them with the Leafs. You can fit them with basically anybody as long as it's not like a super expensive power play stack. So it would be Danault, Laferriere, Fiala for me. That's more of an MME type deal. If you get to them in single entry as a filler, that's fine. I think the Hughes, Bratt, Palat line is fine as a fill, or not as a filler in MME. The more lineups you're making, getting to a little bit is fine. I just wish Nason was on that top line because Kempe, Kopitar, Moore can be had at 5-on-5. I don't know why they haven't been great with Moore there, but with Mercer, with Hischier, I just have no interest.
Yeah, just to, this is our second show in the row bagging on Dawson Mercer, the new Cole Sillinger. Over the last 2.5 seasons, New Jersey scores a full goal less per 60 minutes when Mercer's on the ice with Hischier than when Hischier has literally anybody else on his line. A full goal less over the course of a full season. It's something like 20. It's a 20 goal difference. That is a lot to give up just at 5-on-5. I especially with going into that Danault, not that Kopitar and them have been great defensively. You think that they would figure it out eventually, and they do play a lot with that Gavrikov pair. So out on Hischier, Hughes, Bratt, and Palat would be where my interest is. They're 19,500. They have been good this year. 3.1 goals per 60. Bratt and Palat. Bratt's been closer to 20 minutes of late. Obviously Hughes is usually over 20 minutes. It's still a pretty tough 5-on-5 matchup, and the Kings have been taking fewer penalties. This isn't the team in the first 3 or 4 weeks of the season that was taking 4 penalties a game. It's been closer to 2.5 over the last 5-6 weeks. So it's still not a bad power play spot. I don't think it's a great one. I'm fine with playing New Jersey's Hughes line. One of the reasons being is other than Toronto, there's not a ton in that 19 to 22-ish K range that I really want to play. There's the other night I was pretty gung-ho on playing Colorado. I don't have a line like Toronto, obviously, but if you don't want to play Toronto for whatever reason, I don't think that there's a lot that I'd want to get to there. So that's why I don't have a huge problem playing the Hughes line, although I feel pretty confident saying they're not going to be in my lineup. On the Kings side, it is that Danault line I would go to. We say it all the time. That Siegenthaler-Kovacevic pairing at home is just an absolute meat grinder for the opposition. New Jersey's penalty kill is pretty good. Los Angeles power play seems like they're trying a new unit just about every single game. That's how much that they've been struggling. So I'm not super worried about the power play. Fiala, Laferriere, Danault have been, as Josh would say, nitrous at 5-on-5. 86 shot attempts, 3.8 expected goals, 3.9 actual goals per 60. Fiala gets power play time. They're probably not going to see a ton of that Kovacevic-Siegenthaler pairing. So I don't mind Fiala, Laferriere, Danault here kind of as a filler type. Even if you just want a one-off Fiala or something like that, I think that's fine. But that's probably my favorite line in this game, though I think Hughes is definitely playable.
Yeah, agreed. Detroit Red Wings with a 2.9 total heading into Philadelphia. The Flyers have a 3.1. Excuse me. Detroit going Larkin, DeBrincat, Raymond, Kane, Rasmussen, Casper, Comfort, Tarasenko, Kopp. Good job on that line, Stevie Y. But Flyers running back, Konechny, Couturier, Farabee, Tippett, Mitchkov, Frost, Bobby Brink, Forrester, Cates. These lines have been together for a week. We've almost entered the twilight zone. The Torts has kept these lines together for so long. This is a pretty good matchup for the Flyers. Here's the issue I'm running to on this top line. Konechny, Couturier, Farabee, 14,700, 7.1%. Top two stack, 12.7% projected ownership. It's that ownership. And these could be famous last words because I have a knack for doing that. But the only one worth a damn on that line for DFS recently has been Travis Konechny. Like, Farabee's fine because of his price. But Couturier has just been a vessel on that line. And I want a line that actually has three guys that can contribute. That would be that second line of Tippett, Mitchkov, Frost. Now, this is a good power play spot. The Flyers did score a power play goal the other night. Now Emile Andre is scratched and Jamie Drysdale is back in. I don't really know how that will affect the power play, but I do prefer that second line as a full stack. I think something you can do if you really want to play Travis Konechny, I think is a very good play on this slate, is go like Konechny, Drysdale, because Drysdale's running the power play at 2,900. And we'll talk about defensemen at the end. You can do something like Konechny, Mitchkov, Drysdale, or Konechny, Brink, Drysdale. I don't really like going across lines for the Flyers power play, but like I don't want to have a 13% Flyers 1 in my lineup. Flyers 2 is coming in at 1.1% projected. Only Mitchkov on the top power play unit, though. But like I do like that line. They're $400 cheaper coming in with a tenth of the ownership. So it would be Florida. I keep doing that. The Flyers second line. I even don't mind the Flyers third line if you really are going super expensive with the Leafs, right? They had a good game last game. They have really good numbers together for a third line, and they're only 8,100. So if you are slamming like Toronto power play, I think like Forrester Brink or Cates Brink, something like that, a two-man would be fine. So while I like the top line, it would be the second and third lines for me. I think Konechny one-off is completely fine. On the Detroit side, it would be Detroit 1. Larkin, DeBrincat, Raymond. They're 18,400. Excuse me. They have positive leverage coming in at 4.2%. They're a little bit pricey considering they're on the road. They are fully correlated. It's not the best power play spot. I think it's an MME type deal for me. If they get into your optimizer, that's completely fine. I don't think I'm going out of my way to play Detroit 1 here tonight. I don't hate them, but I don't love them. They're just one of those lines where like, yeah, they're fully correlated and the Flyers goalies suck. So I got to have some if I'm making 20 to 150.
Yeah. It's not that I dislike Detroit here. It's just that, again, in that price range, like I would probably rather go play the Hughes line. We'll get to Pittsburgh in a little bit. Probably rather play the Pittsburgh top line as well. Like, that Detroit top line, 3.3 goals per 60 minutes at 5-on-5 this year. That's pretty good. The power play as currently constructed is shooting 29%. Like half that rate would probably be about normal. Maybe a little bit above that. Like this is they are the definition of riding hot. Flyers penalty kill is generally pretty good. They don't take a ton of penalties either, about league average in that sense. So I think Detroit one is playable. I agree with you. For me, it'd be more like if I was playing 20 max or 150, I would be seriously considering them. But single entry and 3 max and stuff, I just think there are other, lines coming in around 5% or less ownership projected that I would rather play here tonight than that Detroit line. The Philly side, this is interesting because there's 2 things can be kind of true here. Matvei Michkov has produced pretty well on the power play this season. If I'm not mistaken, he's been in on like 91% of the power play goals scored when he's been on the ice. Like, the players just don't do that. You know what I mean? Like, I just talked about William Nylander and Mitch Marner for the Leafs over the last 2.5 seasons being like 63, 65%. Michkov's at 91. The other thing is like a lot of their power play goals have been scored 4-on-3 in overtime, 5-on-3, second power play unit. The top power play unit for the Flyers, and right now I'm just looking with Michkov and Konechny on the ice at 5-on-4, 5.7 goals per 60 minutes. It's about 3 goals less than the league average for a top power play unit. Like, I got to think that power play luck kind of runs out. And it's not as if they're generating a ton and getting a little bit unlucky by shooting percentages. They're generating 80 shot attempts per 60 minutes at 5-on-4. That's like a high-end, like 5-on-5 line, not 5-on-4
line is creating more.
Right. Like quite literally, that Toronto top line, I think, is at like 72 or 73 shot attempts. The Philly power play is at 80. I got to think that luck runs out. The thing is like this Detroit penalty kill is arguably the worst in the league, like certainly amongst the bottom 3. So it's like the stoppable force meets the movable object. It's like which one, who's going to blink first? Like, I think the Flyers are fine. I would probably focus on those power play guys just because they do get ice time. Like, I think you're fine just full on stacking the top line here and then add in Michkov. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think I would add in Drysdale. Like, he's fine because he's so cheap. Like, that's the thing. It's like if he gets an assist and a couple shots, like, you're laughing, right? He just doesn't do a whole lot when he's on the ice. Like, if they score, it's not going to be because of him. It's going to be in spite of him. So I would really focus on the 4 Flyers forward power play forwards here. If you want to just stack the top line plus Michkov, I think that's fine. I think Philly 3 is also in play. Like you said, if you want to play a super expensive Toronto stack, it is the Flyers power play guys I do like best, even if they are 10 to 15% owned here tonight. I just had this gnawing feeling in the back of my head, like just drilling into my guts that playing chalk Flyers is a bad idea. But it is a good spot with a good total, good projections, good pricing and all that. It's just, I wish I could shut my brain off. That's kind of the only way I can go about it.
That's my secret. My brain's never on. The Washington Capitals with a 3.6 total heading into Columbus. Our Blue Jackets have a 3 total. Washington going Pierre-Luc Dubois, Tom Wilson, Alexei Protas, Strome, McMichael, Radish. Columbus going Marchenko, Fantilli, Voronkov, Monahan, Kent Johnson, James Van Riemsdyk. We don't have the correct Washington lines in top stack, so we don't know exactly what the ownership's going to be here. But I do have interest in Strome, McMichael, Radish from the fact that this is a very good power play spot, and they play together. I mean, you could just straight up just go like McMichael, Strome, Carlson, McMichael, Strome, Chikrin. You can just leave off Radish and add in Wilson to make it a little bit more expensive and just, have a stack that way. It would be the Washington power play guys. We just talked about how bad the Detroit penalty kill is. Columbus is right there with them. They're awful. And Washington power play, unlike the Flyers power play, has been good. So it would be the Washington power play guys for me. How you want to attack that, is up to you. I think I would at least try to get McMichael in there, but you can figure that out how you want to do it yourself. On the Columbus side, no one is really playing them in a 3 total, and they're both priced at 14,000. I think I would go to Monahan, Johnson, Van Riemsdyk. Like, I was with you before the season. I had high hopes for Fantilli. He just isn't driving anything right now. Like, there's just no one behind the wheel of the car. So, like, I just want to go to the guys that are playing well, and that's Monahan, Johnson, and Van Riemsdyk. I don't know if we'll get to them in single entry, but under 1% of players are projected to play them here tonight. So for that price and that ownership, I'm in on the Monahan line.
Yeah, I'll start on the Washington side. I do like Strome, McMichael, Radish here tonight. It's not a big sample. Radish and McMichael have played nearly 50 minutes together. The offensive numbers are absolutely preposterous. 76 shot attempts, 5.2 expected goals, 23 high danger chances per 60 minutes. Like, they have been creating a lot. I was looking at some of the isolated metrics. Like, Taylor Radish has actually been driving the play pretty well this season, up and down the lineup, like regardless of where he's been. I'm not sure if I'm a believer in Taylor Radish actually being as good as he's been for the first third of the season, but until he starts playing poorly, he feels like a guy that isn't just a third wheel dragging a line down, a guy that can actually meaningfully contribute. And then you get McMichael and Strome together, both on the power play and 5-on-5. I think that, that line isn't super expensive, right? Like, I think it's 15,500. So it's a nice mid-price line in one of the 3 best power play spots on the board here tonight. So like, if you're not super jazzed about playing chalky, expensive Toronto, or playing, expensive Edmonton, or expensive Detroit, or expensive Vegas, if you're not, excited to play those things, I think a couple mid-price stacks are definitely in play here tonight. And one of them would be that Washington line. I don't think they see a ton of the Monahan line. And once, especially with Justin Danforth out tonight, once you get down to those second and third lines from Columbus, there's just not that much there defensively. And again, you get 2 out of the 3 on the power play. So I really do like that Strome, McMichael, Radish line here tonight. On the Columbus side, it's interesting. Like, I really still do like Columbus here tonight. I agree with you. It would be Kent Johnson and Monahan that I would go to here. Whether I would include James Van Riemsdyk, I'm not sure. Well, he
doesn't play enough.
Right. He definitely doesn't. He's also just 2,700. You know what I mean? So, if he can donk and assist in a couple shots, it's another one of those things, like an assist in 2 shots, and you're probably fine. I think you can include him at a minimum. A Monahan Johnson 2-man makes sense. They even in their sample, they've been very good together at 5-on-5. 77 shot attempts, 3.5 expected goals, 5.5 actual goals per 60 minutes. Still not a big sample. We're talking under 50 minutes. But Monahan's been doing this regardless of his line mates all season long. And seeing as no one's playing them, I do have a little bit of interest in Columbus 1. I think I have more interest on the Washington side, though. I really do like that Strome line. I like this game in general, and I'm going to be honest, there's not a ton of ownership anywhere. Just even looking at those old line combinations, 5.3%, 4.3%, there wasn't a lot of ownership even with those old line combinations. Not a single player projected for 10% plus ownership, and there is a 3.6 total here. I have interest in both sides, probably more on Washington, but for some reason, this game's kind of getting overlooked, and I would probably I'm interested in both sides. I'm not going to say what to play or what not to play, but I think there's stuff to play on both sides, especially looking at a 6.5 total with both teams over 3. And not a single player on the Washington side projected for 10% ownership.
Yeah, you want to know how I know Taylor Radish is going to have a good career in Washington? The Hawks let him go for nothing. So that's all. That's the biggest green light indicator for your.
Yeah. Just like Dylan Strome, like even Brandon Hagel. I mean, that was a trade, but it still wasn't. It wasn't a huge trade. Like, yeah, Nick Schmaltz. It's just
the
Alex
list
Brinkat. The list goes on and on and on. Yeah. It's hilarious.
What a trash franchise. Pittsburgh Penguins with a 3.3 total heading into Montreal. The Canadiens have a 3.2 total. That tells you how awful the Penguins are. Now, Pittsburgh going Crosby, Rust, Raquel, Malkin, Tomasino, Glass. Montreal going Caulfield, Suzuki, Newhook, Laine, Slavkovsky, Doc. So we're kind of at an interesting point here with Pittsburgh. They have the second highest road total of the night. It is a great power play spot. The problem is their power play is atrocious. Crosby, Russ, Raquel, they're 19,600, 9.4% top two stack, 3.4% projected ownership. You're going to tell me you're going to give me a fully correlated Pittsburgh one in a great power play spot with no ownership. Yes, that's what I'm telling you. And I don't know if I want to play them for two reasons. Cliffy alluded to it on Tuesday. One, these guys, considering their price and how bad this roster is, they don't play a ton of minutes. They're playing 18, 19, 20. And for that, I'm just going to go play the Leafs because I know those guys are going to play some big minutes. Two, their power play sucks. So, the best part about playing them doesn't exist because their power play is terrible. Yes, Suzuki, Caulfield, Newhook defensively have been sliding. So if you do want to play them, I think it's fine, but it's not as good as a power play matchup as it appears because the power play is terrible. I think they're fine, but for their price, I'm going to look elsewhere in single entry. I would prefer to play Pittsburgh too. Malkin, Tomasino, Glass. You can do whatever you want with Cody Glass. I'm more interested in Malkin, Tomasino. They're going to avoid that Suzuki line, whether they get the Doc or the Dvorak line. Pick your poison. Both aren't good defensively. The Laine line might be worse, but it doesn't matter. Tomasino and Malkin have had a good sample together since Tomasino's got there. Speaking of franchises who let people go who don't know how to evaluate talent, Nashville is another one that you can throw in the Blackhawks bin, like Tomasino, Ely Tolvanen, and the list goes on. I do have interest in Pittsburgh too here, more than Pittsburgh one as a filler because that full line's only 10,600. They get middle six matchups of the Habs, and let's be honest, they're awful defensively. So Pittsburgh 2 for me. You want to play Pittsburgh 1, I think they're fine. Just, it's not as good of a matchup as it appears because their power play sucks. On the Montreal side, I wish the roles were inversed, right? It was a good power play matchup for the Habs, and then I'd be more likely to play Suzuki, Caulfield, Laine or something like that. But Pittsburgh has a fine penalty kill. The Habs don't have a great power play, although it's gotten a lot better since Laine is just firing rockets from Ovi's office. I think I would go to Caulfield, Suzuki, Newhook at 16,300. Crosby, Rust, Raquel, very good offensively, really bad defensively. So it would be Montreal 1 for me and Pittsburgh 2.
Yeah. Also, just want to mention in Pittsburgh's last game that beat down by Colorado, they had split power play units. I think they moved Brian Rust to the second power play unit and replaced him with Matt Grzelcyk on the top power. So Chris Letang and Matt Grzelcyk are running the Sidney Crosby power play unit now. It's what do you do with this? I think Pittsburgh 1 is still fine. They're not near the top of my list for those expensive lines. Even factoring in ownership, I would much, much rather play Toronto here tonight, rather play New Jersey. I'd even consider Detroit. So I would still probably play Pittsburgh ahead of Detroit, but I would, absolutely rather play Toronto or New Jersey here tonight. So I agree with you. It'd be Pittsburgh too, because that second line for the Habs with Laine there, it's still a small sample. We're only looking at 4 games here. but it has been pretty bad defensively. And I'm not going to lie, I've watched every single one of those games since Line A has returned. The line looks as bad defensively as the numbers show. So this is not a case of where the eye test does not meet up with the numbers. It jives very well with what I've seen. So I think it's a pretty good matchup for that Pittsburgh second line. Tomasino and Malkin are both on the second power play unit, the one with Erik Karlsson. It might actually be the better power play unit now. I'm not going to lie.
It is.
So, secondary matchups, they're fairly cheap. Power play correlation, I like that Malkin Tomasino too, man. Certainly on the Pittsburgh side, especially where, Malkin hasn't been super productive for like the last month, so his price has come down. He's only in the mid fives. Tomasino's still just above mid price. So you could two-man stack them for a little over 8K. I do like them as two-man. Like you said, do what you want with Cody Glass. If you need the savings, put him in. If you don't need him, take him out, that type of thing. I probably have more interest in the Montreal side. The power play has looked better with line A. That's the other thing is, yes, that line has been bad at 5-on-5. Yes, the power play has legitimately been better. It's not just the goal scoring. They're generating more shots. And that, again, is still a small sample. But I was looking at the power play numbers with Lane Hudson running the top power play unit. They're shooting 25% more with Lane Hudson there than they were with Mike Matheson. That is a huge, huge jump because one of Montreal's big problems was just not generating enough shots. Like they could actually finish the shots that they would generate at a reasonable clip. They just weren't generating enough to actually have a good power play. The fact that Hudson has helped facilitate their shots a lot more makes a big difference. I do like Montreal one here going up against that Crosby line. Mid price at 16,300. A little bit of positive leverage. 2 out of the 3 on the top power play unit. If you want to take Newhook off and put Line A on, it's an extra 3K. And, at that point, you're getting close to the 20K range. It is really expensive. But I think that is very doable, especially, Pittsburgh's penalty kill, like you said, they're fine. And they've even been kind of sliding over the last month. So where Montreal's power play has been trending up with Hudson. So I do like the Montreal side better. If I want to play expensive players out of this game, it's probably Montreal one. I think you're fine taking Newhook out for line A. If you want to play Pittsburgh, I'd probably be more inclined to play that Pittsburgh second line than I would the Crosby line.
Yep, we are in agreement. Caulfield or Line A for a one-off. I mean, Caulfield's on the power play, and he has a better 5-on-5 matchup because I have a feeling Line A's line is going to get – they're going to be in their defensive zone a lot more. We'll just put it that way.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I agree. I would go Caulfield.
Yeah. Chicago Blackhawks with a 2.4 total heading into Long Island. That sucks. The Islanders have a 3.1 total. That sucks. This game sucks. Let's talk about it. Chalk Islanders. Hello, darkness, my old friend. How have we been? They have said we are chalk on every slate, and we haven't played them. Now, Islanders going Horvat, JG Pajot, Siplikov, Lee, Nelson, Palmieri. That line is projected for 17.2% ownership. Nelson and Lee do not have a good sample together. Now, they are fully correlated, and Chicago is Chicago. You're not going to find Islanders in my lineup. If I had to do anything, it would be some sort of power play stack. I just, these lines suck. They suck so much. I want to play Chicago, but the problem with Chicago is they suck even worse than the Islanders, and they have Philip Kurashev and Ilya Mikheyev with Connor Bedard. If Connor Bedard had actual line mates today, I would have been interested in Chicago one. That's how bad the Islanders have been with these line combinations. But as it stands, if you want to play the Islanders, as Cliffy says, fill your boots. I am fading them. I wanted to play Chicago because the Islanders lines have been atrocious defensively. The bottom six is atrocious. But these Chicago lines are unplayable. The only playable one would be Donato, Hall, Bertuzzi. But for almost 13,000, I'm going to go play other lines that aren't the Blackhawks. So this game sucks.
Yeah. The Islanders side, the line that you would play is Lee, Nelson, Palmieri. I was looking at Bo Horvat's numbers without Anders Lee on his line this year, and they are not good. 1.8 goals per 60 minutes. Like Anders Lee has been up, like it feels weird to say, he's probably been the Islanders' best forward this season, especially with Matt
Barzal got hurt. Definitely.
Yeah, especially with Barzal out for the last 6 weeks or whatever it's been. Like I'm pretty sure Lee's been their best forward. But you were mentioning his sample with Brock Nelson, 1.9 expected goals per 60 at 5-on-5, 2.3 actual goals per 60. Like obviously those are well below average numbers. So I'm not, it's still a small sample for the season. We're talking about, just about 50 minutes, but they haven't been generating a ton. They haven't been scoring a ton. They were better earlier. Like, remember, like a couple years ago, Anders Lee was a staple of the second line, basically until Pierre Engvall got there, right? And they were pretty good together. But at 17% ownership, single entry, maybe they're closer like 20% plus. It's not like, it's not like Chicago, like this isn't a good power play spot. Like the Islanders have a bad power play, and the Chicago penalty kill is actually like decent. Chicago doesn't take a ton of penalties either. And the Islanders certainly don't draw a ton. Like I get at their price at 15,700, like you do have to consider them. But like if I'm going to play a cheap chalk line tonight, it's probably going to be like Philly. You know what I mean?
I'd rather play St. Louis over that.
St. Louis, which we'll get to next. Like there are cheap chalk lines in that, 13 to 16K range that I think are playable, that I'd rather play, ahead of the Islanders. Like I have no problem playing them, or if somebody wants to play them, I am not going to. It's the last time I said this, I think Bo Horvat had a 2-goal game, but I'm going to say it again. If the Islanders bury me tonight, then the Islanders bury me, and I'll just, I'll wake up tomorrow and just go about my day. On the Chicago side, I'm going to be honest, the only line I have interest in is that second line. Donato, Hall, and Bertuzzi. Donato and Hall actually have a good sample together this season. 59 shot attempts, 3 expected goals per 60. Donato and Bertuzzi are both on the power play, but like you said, like, am I going to run out and play Chicago on the road, the second line without Connor Bedard on a 10-game slate when there are just a ton of cheap spots in mid-price spots elsewhere that you can go play with that won't have a lot of ownership either? Like, I think Chicago 2 is fine. If I was 20 maxing and above, I would certainly be considering them. I'm not running out to play them in single entry.
Yeah, me either. San Jose Sharks. I can't believe we're following that game up with this game. San Jose Sharks with a 2.5 total heading into St. Louis. The Blues have a 3.4 total. St. Louis going Kyrou, Thomas, Buchnevich, Shen, Neighbors, Saad. Holloway, Bolduc, Sundqvist. The only reason I'm mentioning that third line is Dylan Holloway has been pretty good recently. He's been shooting the puck. He just doesn't play a ton of minutes. San Jose going Granlund, Zetterlund, Kostin, Celebrini, Toffoli, Kovalenko, and Georgiev is starting. This is a game. Kyrou, Thomas, Buchnevich, $16,600, $900 more than that Islanders second line. 12% top 2 stack, 19.4% projected ownership. So their top 2 percentage is 3% higher, and their ownership is 2% higher. I much prefer to play the Blues here than the Islanders. I just, like, it's a great power play spot, but is it? Like, I don't even know who the Blues power play quarterback is. Like, who is it?
I mean, seeing as Perunovic looks like he's going to be scratched again, I think it's going to be Justin Falk. But yeah, I made that point in the Discord this morning that they've had a different defenseman run the top power play unit in their last 3 games.
Yeah. So, like, yeah, Quick Party says it was Falk yesterday or last game. Yeah, I mean, like, it should be Perunovic, but listen, we're not Jim Montgomery. Like, you can't really fit the Blues in with the Leafs, right? So, like, Buchnevich is the cheapest one, so he's going to be the highest owned, because I have a feeling a lot of people are just going to go like Leafs, Buchnevich. So I think if you're going to do something with the Blues, you kind of like, and you want a power play stack, I think you go like Thomas Kyrou Neighbors just to get a unique 3-man. Like, obviously St. Louis one is fine. But if you're one of those people who like sweat over if you're duped in your ownership, which you shouldn't do, but I know people do. So like, I'm trying to give you advice in that scenario. I think I would leave off Buchnevich and put in Neighbors. I'm perfectly fine with St. Louis one at that ownership. Like, I don't know if I want to play them. I kind of have interest in the Sharks side. Like, let's not pretend that St. Louis is a good team. Yes, they've gotten a little bit better since Jim Montgomery got there, but they still are not good defensively. Their penalty kill sucks. The Sharks have a pretty good power play. The one thing is the Blues don't take a ton of penalties, but like the Sharks are cheap enough. And the sample with Toffoli and Celebrini have been very, very good. So like, I kind of have interest in the Celebrini Toffoli 2-man. Will I say it's my favorite thing in this game? No, because it's obviously St. Louis 1. I love this line. But like, on this slate with that ownership, it does worry me that it's going to be something that like I don't want to hinge my night to. So like I don't really mind Celebrini Toffoli here. Like their sample is good and the Blues aren't great defensively. So while St. Louis 1 and St. Louis power play are fine, I think you do have to consider some Sharks here.
Yeah, that Kyrou Thomas Buchnevich line hasn't played a ton together this year. They are up over 70 minutes. 3.5 expected goals per 60, only 1.6 actual goals per 60, but that's shooting like 5%. You got to think that's going to regress. Robert Thomas being back is pretty important for the power play. Obviously, I was looking at the top power play unit with Robert Thomas, 10.8 goals per 60 minutes. Without Robert Thomas, 2.3. So like, the shooting percentage of nearly 21% obviously helps, but even like 16, 17%, they'd be 3 times better than they were than when Thomas was hurt. So it is a fine power play spot. The Blues don't draw a ton of power play opportunities. I think they're last in the league over the last 31 days in power play opportunities per game. That's definitely not ideal. Sharks haven't really been taking a ton of penalties in that span. I do like St. Louis 1. They are good at 5-on-5, better on the power play with Robert Thomas back. Not worried about any matchups on the Sharks side. It's just whether do you want to play them at 20% or not. Like that's just kind of the only decision that has to be made. I would probably still be fine with playing them at that ownership. And the reason why is because there are a ton of mid-price lines that I think are in play here tonight. We already talked about Philly. We already talked about Columbus. We already talked about Washington. We already talked about Montreal. We still have to talk about Dallas. We still have to talk about, some Vegas depth. Like there are a bunch of lines in that price range. Like I'm not super concerned about any duplication or anything like that. So I think even at that ownership, St. Louis 1 is perfectly fine. San Jose, like that Celebrini Toffoli line, I wonder how Kovalenko's going to fit in. I'm not going to lie, some of the tracking data I was looking at from all 3 zones for Kovalenko and Colorado wasn't that bad. I just think they need, like in Colorado's top 6, you need to be like an all-star, right? Kovalenko's just not that yet. I think he'll get a little bit more time, obviously, with San Jose, a little bit more patience, let's say, from the coaching staff. Whether he works with Celebrini and Toffoli or not, I don't know. But like you said, at 12,600, I think it's worth finding out, especially where I don't think they're going to see a ton of the Robert Thomas line. Once you get down to those second and third St. Louis lines, like there's not a whole lot there. So if you are paying up for Edmonton, Toronto, those types of things, I think San Jose 2 is definitely one of those stacks you have to consider. But yes, I like the Blues best in this game.
Yeah. Like, you can't just jam in Toronto 1 and St. Louis 1. So it's like you're going to have to decide whether you want expensive chalk or mid-range chalk on this slate. So how about it? Nashville Predators with a 2.5 total heading into Dallas. The Stars have a 3.5 total. Ryan O'Reilly and Gustav Nyquist are back, but they're going to be on the second line with Colton Sissons. And then leaving Forsberg, Stamkos, and Marchessault together. Yes, they had a good game last game. A broken clock is right twice a day. 18,300 in this matchup. If you want to play them, be my guest. I am not. I am pretty much out on Nashville. Yossi's out. Brady Shea is going to be on the power play. Brady Shea has had a pretty bad season. Obviously, the interest to me is on the Dallas side. Now, Dallas going Robertson, Johnston, Hintz, Duchesne, Marchman, Stankoven. This was last year. It would have been an obvious Hintz, Wyatt Johnston, Robertson. But like Robertson's off, Wyatt Johnston's not having a great season. There's 16,500 coming in at 10%. Duchesne, Marchman, Stankoven fully correlated on the second power play unit, which has been the better unit. 16,400, 1.5% projected ownership. Stankoven in for Sagan. Their numbers have been just as good, if not better. This is a Dallas 2 game for me. Even if they see a fair bit of that Ryan O'Reilly, Nyquist, Sissons line, like I don't care. Like Nashville's a slow team. They're not a very good team. In fact, they're one of the worst in the league. The only thing that keeps them respectable in games is Saros, and that is a tad of a concern. But at 1.5% at 16.4, I am willing to take a stab on Duchesne, Marchman, Stankoven.
You're right about Stankoven being just as good on the second line as Tyler Seguin was. They're at 3.5 expected goals per 60 with Stankoven there. Not scoring as much. It's a small sample. Shooting percentage is down. I imagine that figures itself out fairly quickly. Here's the thing is that leaving Stamkos and Forsberg together on the top line, that's going to be a pretty poor defensive line, I think. Their defensive numbers have been poor in the small sample, 3 expected goals against per 60 in 60 minutes together without Ryan O'Reilly as the center. And Robertson's probably going to see a fair bit of his 5-on-5 time, that Robertson line against Stamkos and Forsberg. So I think it's a pretty good matchup for the Dallas top line at 5-on-5. What I worry about is power play, because the power play has gotten better over like the last month. Still not good. It's like still certainly not what it was last year or the year before. The top power play unit anyway. Like they've been below average. They've been better, and they've still been below average for a top power play unit. You know what I mean? Like there's just so far to go because of how far they were struggling to start the season. And, you know, Nashville's penalty kill has actually been fine. A lot of it's been UC Saros. So if he has an off game, obviously that changes things. But it would still be Dallas 1, I think, for me. Robertson, Johnston, and Hintz. I just really, really like the 5-on-5. Going up against that Stamkos line, I think they're going to crush them at 5-on-5. The question is whether they can do anything on the power play. That is a concern. But at 16,500, you know, this isn't the 20K line of last year. If you can get a couple goals and a couple assists from them, you're probably going to be fine. So I think both of those Dallas lines are very much in play. Dallas 2 has honestly had the better numbers this year. I just think it's a better matchup for Dallas 1 in this game. So I would go to the Robertson line. I think both lines perfectly acceptable here. I am not playing Nashville here tonight. Again, if they burn me, they burn me. Like we'll get to the defenseman. I'll have some interest in the defenseman. As far as the forwards go, I'm out.
Does Yossi being out hurt them defensively though? Like it doesn't matter, but like no. I don't know.
Well, I don't know if like I think hurts them defensively. It's a little simplistic. The problem is like Alex Carrier's already out and Jeremy Lauzon's already out. So now you're missing half your blue line. It's not like Yossi's great defensively, but is their third best AHL defenseman better than Yossi defensively? Like, I don't think so.
Yeah, these guys having to step up are just not it. I think that's the issue. Vegas Golden Knights with a 2.7 total heading into Winnipeg. The Jets have a 2.8. Winnipeg going Connor, Shifley, Velarde, Perfidi, Nemestikov, Chibrikov. Say that 5 times fast. And then Lowry, Niederreiter, Appleton. Vegas going Eichel, Stone, Barbashev, Carlson, Dorofeyev, Howden, Hurdle, Olsen, Holt. I don't have a ton of interest in this game. Like, I kind of wanted to like Vegas here. The problem is Eichel, Stone, Barbashev, 20,400. That's just unplayable to me in a single entry with a 2.7 road total. And neither the Carlson Dorofeyev or the Hurdle Olsen line have been very good at 5-on-5. So like I don't have a ton of interest in Winnipeg in Vegas, excuse me. Again, I don't have a ton of interest in Winnipeg either. It would be that top line. This is another flowchart game. The flowcharted the other night. My God. If you didn't have Colorado, you needed Winnipeg 1, but like everyone just played Colorado, so like you didn't see any Winnipeg at the top of the leaderboard. But I don't mind Connor Scheifele-Velarde and MME. It's just a matter of, how much you get to. The price is all right, like 19.9. Like, I don't know. Like, I think I would slightly prefer Pittsburgh 1. That's kind of where I'm at with them. I don't have a ton of interest in this game. I think Lowry, Niederreiter, Appleton as a filler can be used in MME. But, like, again, I don't have a ton of interest in this game.
Yeah, we should note when I was going through this game this morning, Vegas had a 2.9 total, Winnipeg 3.1 for a 6 total. The update this afternoon, Vegas is down to 2.7, Winnipeg is down to 2.8. This game has gone down a full half goal in 8 hours.
Yeah.
Like, the under has been getting hammered. That makes me really nervous. Not to say that Vegas is always right and that the bettors are right and the sharps moving the lines are right. Like, this is still hockey. Anything can happen on a given night. But when I see a game started at 6 and get hammered down a full half goal in 8 hours, 6 hours even, like, that's concerning. Honestly, if anything, if I'm playing an expensive line in this game, it's probably Winnipeg. The Vegas doesn't really concern me defensively at all. The power play for Winnipeg hasn't been as good without Ehlers, but I think Perfidi over the long haul could be fine for them on the power play. Vegas's penalty kills kind of struggled at times this year. Like, I would rather play Winnipeg 1 than Pittsburgh here tonight. I would rather play them than Detroit. But again, I would probably rather go to New Jersey. I would certainly rather go to Toronto, even with that ownership. Going down a few thousand, I'd definitely rather play Dallas. So like, there are just other lines that I would rather play. I think Winnipeg 1 is perfectly fine, but I'm not super excited to play them. Honestly, the only line that I have a ton of interest in this game, believe it or not, is Hurdle, Olofsson, Holtz. The only reason is power play, right? Hurdle, Olofsson still getting some power play time. Absolutely breaks my heart that our boy Pavel Dorofeyev booted off the top power play unit. Now, Hurdle and Olofsson haven't had a ton of time together this year. The sample that they are together hasn't been good, but I'm not super stressed about it. It's just that they both play the power play. That line is really, really cheap, especially if you have Holtz there at 11,200. It's one of those filler lines I don't mind here tonight, especially where they're not going to see much. They're not going to see the Adam Lowry line. That Adam Lowry line at home this year, under 1 goal against per 60 minutes at 5-on-5. It's just absolutely, it's preposterous. Not that it's good. Not that they allow a lot of goals otherwise. Obviously, Hellebuck's been great, but that would be the one line that I would have interest in because they are filler status. And you can pair them with, your Torontos, your New Jerseys, your Edmontons, and things like that. So probably the Hurdle line from Vegas for me. If I want to play an expensive line, it is Winnipeg. But like you, I don't have a ton of interest in this game.
Yeah, when we first started doing shows together, 5.5s were very common. They are not common anymore, especially when they open at 6 and get slammed down to 5.5. You do not see that a lot. And not that we paid, like, I can't speak for Cliffy. I don't give much attention to Vegas totals in terms of line movement and what I'm going to do in DFS, but like, it is kind of like a flashing red light when you see that get slammed that heavily in such a short amount of time. So Edmonton Oilers with a 3.2 total heading into Minnesota. The Wild have a 2.7. If you're into BVP, here's your BVP stat of the day. Minnesota has beaten the Oilers 6 straight times in Minnesota. That being said, this is a pretty brutal matchup for Edmonton. I would be more excited about Edmonton if their power play was doing anything. Like, their power play has been legitimately bad. and this is a pretty good power play spot. Like Minnesota at 5-on-5 is just a straight up meat grinder, but their penalty kill sucks, and it sucked for a long time. It doesn't matter who the coach is. I don't know what the cure is there, but I don't know. Like, if you want to take a stab on Edmonton 1 here, they're coming in only at 5% projected. And like I said, Lowe and McDavid always makes me nervous. And I don't think I'm going to be running out to play them in single entry. But like 5% McDavid line in a good power play matchup, if they happen to find that juju, I don't know, man. Like, if I was playing 20 to 150, I'd be over the field. That's just my personal thing. Drysdale, Podkolzin, they've been good, but you know that line's 12-8. So like as a filler, I guess it's fine. Minnesota 1 is interesting. They're 21,100. Kaprizov, Boldy, Rossi, coming in at 8.9% projected. Like they've been really, really good with Rossi there. They're $500 cheaper than Toronto 1. They're the second most expensive line on the night, and they're coming in around half the ownership of Toronto 1. Like, it's not as good of a matchup. But, like, I cannot help but think about Here Come the Oiler narrative on Twitter that we love late night. I don't mind taking a stab on Kaprizov, Boldy, Rossi here either. Like, am I going to prioritize this game in single entry? I don't think so. But, like, you'd be a fool just to X this game out and not have interest in Minnesota or Edmonton top lines here.
Yeah. Interesting. I mean, one of the interesting things about this game is Calvin Pickard is set to start here tonight. Not that Skinner has generally been great this year. Skinner has been a lot better lately, and Pickard has been worse. I think like Skinner's like last 6 or 7 games or whatever, he's been a lot better. Pickard's just generally been bad all season. That Minnesota top line, as currently constructed, 3.3 expected goals for, 1.6 against per 60. They've been pretty dominant so far this season. I do have a little bit of interest, especially like if you don't, like you said, if you don't want to play Toronto chalk, I think this is the spot to go to. Like 18.9% or 18.1% top 2 stack is the second highest on the board. And we've already gone through a ton of filler stacks that we want to play here tonight. Like a 2.7 total isn't high. If Minnesota gets to 3 goals here tonight, I'm pretty sure the top line is likely gonna figure heavily into that, right? Like this feels like it's one of those spots, almost kind of like St. Louis, where like if St. Louis gets to 4 goals, I feel pretty confident saying that the top line gets heavily involved. It's like Minnesota. If they get to 3, I feel like the top line has to be involved heavily. So I don't mind Minnesota 1 here. Edmonton's generally good defensively. The goaltending is not. So like Minnesota can score like 4 goals on 20 shots here tonight. They can very easily do that. So I think there is a decision to make. Generally speaking, Toronto is in a much better matchup. Don't get me wrong. It's kind of like the inverse matchup where Edmonton's good defensively, goaltending sucks. Anaheim is terrible defensively, goaltending's great. Which one do you want to go to? Pick your poison. But I think Minnesota 1 is certainly in play here. I want to play Edmonton. Like I really do. Is anytime I can get a fully correlated Connor McDavid line at 5% ownership, like I generally try to take those chances, especially with Eriksson Ek and Brodin still not back. If Edmonton's power play was playing the way it was last year at this point, I would probably be slamming Edmonton in here tonight, but they haven't. And it's not just they shoot, partially it is shooting percentage, partially it's that they're just not generating near the same amount of shots or quality of shots that they were on the power play last year or the year before. Maybe it turns around, Hyman's back and healthy. Maybe it turns around now. We'll see. I don't think I'm playing Edmonton. I'm not crossing them off entirely. Even with Brodin and Eriksson Ek out, it's still a tough defensive matchup. But again, when you can get a Connor McDavid line that has been scoring 3.8 goals per 60 at 5-on-5 this year at 5% ownership. I think you have to consider them at the least, but they're the only line I consider. Like I'm not dipping down into the depth from Edmonton here.
And if you do live on Narrative Street, a lot of people do. Our boy Jake Hari will be in attendance tonight. If that persuades you one way or the other. Now I'm fading. Now that I remembered that, I'm just out of the game. No, but like honestly, if Edmonton had a semi-decent power play compared to last year, like this would have been a much different discussion, but their power play's been terrible. Let's talk about defensemen. Top of the board, we have Werenski, Bouchard, Hamilton, Morrissey, John Carlson, Noah Dobson, Miro Heiskanen, Moritz Seider from the 6K and up. I think Werenski is interesting, especially if I think like if I was playing that Monahan line, I'm putting Werenski with them. I don't know if I'd one off Werenski tonight. Like it's fine, but 8,100 like is really costly if you're trying to get up to the Torontos, the Minnesotas, Edmontons, whatever of the world. I do really like John Carlson here. It's a great power play spot for him. It's really about in the top range. With Yossi out, there's going to be some Nashville blue liners that could pique some interest. What are you seeing here?
It's kind of funny that the 4 games they cut off are the 4 games that end up getting cut off for defensemen, because you lose Makar, you lose Sergachev, you lose Hedman, you lose Uyghur, you lose Quinn Hughes. Like there are a lot of expensive, good defensemen in those late games that are just not on the slate. Werenski and Carlson 1-2 for me on the main slate here tonight. Carlson is down a little bit from Werenski, but in overall projection on Stochastic here tonight, but their point per dollar projection is pretty close. So those are 1 and 2, just depending on the rest of your build, how you'd want to go here. I think Cedar is fine. Not the thing is like Cedar at 3K, like I would probably just go pay the extra $300 and play John Carlson instead, or take a little bit of savings and drop down to Jacob Chikrin. Like it's just kind of no man's land. So it's really Werenski, Carlson at the top. The mid-price range is interesting. You have Justin Falk running the power play, which like he's projecting well. He's been shooting a bit more. Power plays better with Thomas. Like he's fine. Thomas Harley, certainly at 4K, is interesting to me. Jacob Chikrin, just mentioned him at 5,400. Really good spot, especially on the power play for Washington. Jake Wallman, I'll always have interest in him as long as he doesn't get to like that 6, especially where he's under 5,500. He's at 5,200 on DK here tonight. He's pretty good blocking, certainly racks up the shots, can score. Like he brings a lot across the board. So I don't mind Wallman either. For cheap guys, like obviously Brady Shea, I'm interested to see what Shea's ownership is going to be here tonight, because it's not a great spot, but he's 3,500 and is probably going to have to play like 25 minutes and run the top power play for Nashville. So obviously Brady Shea. Jamie Drysdale, he's 2,900 running the power play. He's fine. Jake McCabe is back for Toronto. Not that I'm a huge Jake McCabe guy, but he's min price. He's down to 2,500. If you need a mid-price guy against the Anaheim Ducks, I think that's your guy. The other cheap Dallas defensemen, Lindell and Lyubushkin, are certainly in play, especially with Matt Dumba out. I mentioned Matt Grzelcyk running the quote top power play unit for Pittsburgh for whatever that's worth. So I think Grzelcyk is fine. Going to be honest, not a ton of cheap guys that I like here tonight. Like I said, Drysdale for power play I think is fine. Simon Edmondson for Detroit at 3,900 certainly. Jake McCabe, Stone Min, Brady Shea, I imagine is fairly chalk here tonight. But other than those 4, basically, there's just not a lot down there I like.
Yep. Let's talk about goalies. Boy, like the top range is pretty busy here tonight. I do like Stellars. I think there's legitimate shutout upside there. Sorry. I actually like both goalies in that game, and we'll get to the cheap guys in a second, but I think Ottinger is also fine. There is shutout upside there. I think Markstrom makes a lot of sense. Kings, they're a pretty high volume team. It is a pretty tough matchup for the Kings there. Hellebuck sticks out at 7,800. That game, the under got slammed there. So don't mind Gustafsson. He is their best goalie. Don't really love playing the goalie against Edmonton because they kind of have that Tampa Bay problem where they're very efficient at times. But yeah, for the cheaper guys, I think Montembeault at 7,400 makes some sense. Whoever's starting for the Kings, if it's Kemper, I would have a little bit of interest there. And then Lucas Dostal at 6,900. With risk of jinxing him, I'll knock on some wood. And if I blow it, you guys can blow me up on the next show on my Twitter. 6,900, he hasn't gone negative yet this season. He will see a ton of volume. He has legitimately been one of the best goalies in the league. So if you are I talk about it a lot. That's not how you leverage chalk. But Lucas Dostal under 7K against the chalk line with a chance to see the saves bonus interests me. Will I be playing Toronto tonight? Probably. But the same reason I like Toronto is the same reason I like Dostal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree with that. Certainly, if you need a super cheap goalie, he's in play. I'll also mention Arvid Soderblom, 7,200 for Chicago. It's not like the Islanders have a great offense. They can score, but I'm not terrified of them. So I think Soderblom for 7,200 makes sense. Also mentioned Cam Talbot. They didn't confirm that Cam Talbot's going to start. It looks that way, but always check warmups to make sure, because they said there's a chance Billy Husso still might go. So Cam Talbot 7,500 I think is in play as well. For the expensive goalies, like Markstrom and Sorokin are the two that stood out. Markstrom at home against the Kings. It's the Kings can generate a 5-on-5. They're not very good on the power play. As long as Markstrom doesn't fall apart at 5-on-5, I think he'll be fine here tonight. I think Stolarz is in play for Toronto. He definitely has shutout equity. He's not a guy, he's not first into my lineup, but if I make a lineup and I have 8,700 left over, then I think putting in Stolarz is fine. But yeah, I would probably lean Markstrom or Sorokin for expensive goalies.
Man, Kolosov is starting for Philly. That's a mess. Calvin Pickard. Jet Greaves called up to start for there's some gas cans on here, but it is what it is. There's always gas cans. We will be back on Saturday. Who are you liking for your hat trick pick?
McJesus himself, Connor McMichael.
Damn it. I had a Washington Calf as well. I was going to say Jacob Chikrin, just keep it real spicy. But let's get a secondary pick here, because as I said in the Discord, I don't like two hat trick picks from the same team. I'm going to go grip it and rip it with Owen Tippett.
Flyers, great spot here tonight. See if they can actually pull through, if they're going to fall on their face.
Yeah. We will be back on Saturday. I think there's one game tomorrow, something like that. I don't know what the schedule. Weird scheduling this week, but good luck everybody tonight, and we'll see you in Discord. Hopefully you're sharing some screenshots late at night that I'll wake up to, because I'm old and I can't stay awake that long anymore.
Good luck tonight, everyone.